Hello everyone, this is Crota giving you a shoutcast between MTW Demuslim versus iNSoLeNCE here in the Xel'Naga Caverns. iNSoLeNCE spawned as the blue Protoss player on the north side of the map. Meanwhile, we have Demuslim spawning over here on the south side of the map as the red Terran. So this is going to be Terran versus Protoss here in the Xel'Naga Caverns. Now the Xel'Naga Caverns is one of those maps that I really like just because of the number of different play styles that it adheres to. There is a fairly large walking distance between these two locations, and now we already see an early probe moving out from iNSoLeNCE. So iNSoLeNCE moving out with this early probe, looking to perhaps do some sort of do a proxy gateway, may try to put a pylon back over here. However, there is already a pylon here, so not sure exactly what this probe was going for. I guess the probe wanted to move out and make sure and do a very early scout. So this probe scouting out even before that pylon is very critical. And now this probe coming in to deal damage already, and with iNSoLeNCE and this early probe, he will be able to get a lot of damage on these SCVs and perhaps try to delay any barracks. So if that barracks gets delayed because this probe's shields recharge so quickly in the early portion of the game, that probe should be able to turn around and start fighting against this SCV once again. And now a second SCV coming off. So this probe actually took 5 points of damage and now pulling away. Will another SCV? No, this is still the first SCV. That SCV did take 15 points of damage, and now Demuslim moving around with a new SCV once again. However, this probe gonna go ahead and deal more damage towards a fresh SCV. This one SCV down to what, 25 hit points, and now this probe down to 9 hit points with 0 shields. So a new SCV once again going to engage, and now this probe still wandering around on the inside. We do see a gateway and an assimilator being placed down already as this probe trying to do as much harassment as possible. This probe down to what, 9-10 shields, and still waiting for that to recharge. Gonna turn around in just a second and deal damage towards that SCV. Wait for it. No. Oh, it actually took 5 points of damage without dealing any. So this probe still perhaps waiting for that shield to recharge once again. Now will be able to recharge. Gonna turn around, deal damage, attack, and this SCV and this probe once again gonna go ahead and attack. No, now this probe gonna move back over here. However, one Marine already in position. So that Marine in position will be able to shoot down that probe if that probe attempts to run into the base, and now pulling back at just the right moment as a second Marine would have been able to take down that probe. So that probe does not want to try to run up that ramp. Meanwhile, the SCV of Demuslim will be able to get some scouting information into this base right now. So iNSoLeNCE revealing his cybernetics core and his second assimilator back in the base of Demuslim now getting a supply depot over here, denying any drop play that would allow Immortals, Zealots, and Stalkers to come in through this gap, and now throwing down a second Rax. We do see the reactor now being placed down as well. So this is going to be a reactor into a double Rax style of play. We should see a tech lab on one of these barracks in order to get combat shield and stim packs with some marauders being trained. iNSoLeNCE over here with one probe. This probe still hanging around outside of the space, making sure that there is no expansion attempt. One stalker over here on this ground, and now a second gateway being warped in. So iNSoLeNCE in a very strong position. Now getting that Twilight Council, may be able to perhaps try to blink and start harassing the base of Demuslim. Demuslim, however, now moving around, making sure that there is no proxy pylon anywhere on the map, making sure there's no proxy pylon here. One of the reasons why Xel'Naga Caverns is so popular, I believe, is because there is so many different styles of play you can go for. There are now 6 Marines and now a tech lab and another tech lab being thrown down. So 2 additional tech labs. We may get another refinery, and this refinery may allow for some ghost play. So Demuslim, however, may just try to be researching that combat shield and that stim pack at that same time. We'll see what's going to be happening. Yeah, combat shield and stim pack now being researched. Mass Marines may be coming out in just a moment as more Marines being trained out from here. So we see SCVs continuing to be dumped, and Demuslim only sitting on one geyser at this time in order to get more and more minerals, finally throwing down a second refinery there. However, in the base, iNSoLeNCE now chrono boosting, able to get that warp gate, going to be upgrading this, and now getting that Templar Archive. So very critical. Templar Archives now chrono boosting in order to get Psystorm. However, I would have thought that iNSoLeNCE would have tried to get one High Templar first before getting that Templar Archives, just because of the necessary energy. You can see that the iNSoLeNCE does have a lot of energy, or still has another chrono boost left in this Nexus. Perhaps going to try to chrono boost this one Psystorm research again, and that will be very strong to deal with the amount of Marines that we will be seeing coming out. Demuslim now transferring into factories and most likely into a starport play, and with Marine medevac down over here, we now have 1 missile turret. So Demuslim, I guess he's afraid of any observers trying to come in, or perhaps even Dark Templars pushing through. If Dark Templars were able to get into the space, it would just wreak havoc without this missile turret. And then as a Terran player, you really want to try to save those orbital command mules for mules, sorry, the energy on the orbital command for mules, because you are trying to dump a lot of Marines and Marauders out of this location here. Back in this base, you see more Zealots continuing to be trained, and we now see 2 High Templars. 1 High Templar has enough energy, the second one does not. Not sure what these 2 High Templars are going to be doing on that high ground, as the Psystorm research has been completed. Most likely, we should see the Amulet research as well. Amulet research so important in the early game, as it allows these High Templars to be warped in with a Psystorm already ready. So we see Marines, Marauders to push out. I do not see any sentries, however, so 1 sentry needs to be warped in. Otherwise, these units may be able to just run straight into this base. You want to try to trap your opponent, so a sentry needs to be warped in. Are we warping in sentries? No, just warping in, continually warping in more and more Zealots at this stage in the game. We have 1 probe now moving out, units moving out. Again, perhaps this probe will try to set down a pylon here, and then a nexus here momentarily. A factory now moving out, so that scouting factory moving out, and we also have the starport with that reactor. So it is going to be a 3 racks play, 1 with a reactor with a reactor starport, in order to gain and as much healing as possible. Level 1 weapons upgrade nearing completion, also getting Zealot charge. So in this game, iNSoLeNCE should be able to handle this very early Marine Marauder army. You can see that this Marine Marauder army is sitting on, what, 1,500 minerals and 300 gas. However, as soon as these High Templars are able to get even 1 or 2 Psystorms off, they should be able to neutralize some of them. However, no sentries whatsoever. So these units will be able to stim around a little bit too effectively, moving in and out. So 1 Stalker, however, moving out a little bit too far, down to 12 hit points there. Are we going to get any feedback onto those medevacs? That if you feedback a medevac, it takes damage, and it also denies healing across a lot of these Marines and these Marauders. So that would have been a very decent play. Zealots now moving out. The Zealots do not yet have that leg research. However, we are getting Ghost. So Ghost now being trained up by Demuslim. Demuslim, the Ghost, a perfect counter to those High Templars, who generally group together in the back of this whole entire army, now trying to take down these High Templars here. So those High Templars going after that, and now more Stalkers coming in. Another Psystorm, however, missing any of those, any Marauder there. Marauder down to 16 hit points, will try to get healed, and now we have a proxy pylon down here on the low ground. So iNSoLeNCE will be able to get reinforcements very easily. 1 SCV here, and should get taken down. However, does he reveal that pylon? That pylon is revealed. So now Demuslim needs to realize that he's going to be in a little bit of a hurt here. We do have Ghost, and now the Mobius reactor being researched as well, in order to get additional EMP shockwaves. This Ghost will have enough for 1 EMP shockwave, and now iNSoLeNCE decides to pull back. We do have iNSoLeNCE with 1 gateway, 1 photon cannon here, and now trying to saturate his natural expansion. iNSoLeNCE sitting on 35 harvesters compared to 37s at his with his natural expansion currently mining. Meanwhile, Demuslim should be upgrading to a planetary fortress or an orbital command in just a moment. I would suggest that he upgrade. Oh, he's going to go for a planetary fortress. This is a little bit unheard of, as normally your second base, you normally still want an orbital command. An orbital command with those additional mule call-downs gives you a lot more minerals. Later on, perhaps your third base, you build a planetary fortress, because you already have enough units for full saturation. 1 factory over here still getting plenty of scouting information, now that the level 1 weapons upgrade is currently being researched. Marines, Marauders, and now 3 Ghosts moving out. These Ghosts with EMP Shockwave does not have Cloak yet. Planetary Fortress has been completed, and now that Armory, and now in comes a push here. Zealot's going to go ahead and engage on these units. The factory now going to get, this Planetary Fortress now going to get focused down a little bit more. SCVs, are they going to get some Psystorm? Yeah, Psystorm on top of a whole bunch of SCVs, and those SCVs are just getting just destroyed here. However, a lot of the Zealots taking some significant splash damage. Yeah, and now losing a couple of those High Templars, but a lot of SCVs have been taken down. EMP Shockwave now destroying a lot of these, or depleting the shields on a lot of these units here, and now going to merge into an Archon. No, unable to merge into an Archon, as those Ghosts were sniping key units. Very nicely done. Taking a look at the unit count, we see 27 harvesters versus 45. However, there is a very large army difference at this stage. The iNSoLeNCE doing a good job preventing any of these SCVs from mining at this stage. However, the Muslim with a 2100 mineral army needs to engage and in a hurry. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to keep up with the macro of iNSoLeNCE. iNSoLeNCE now trying to run off of 6 gateways. Needs to continue to chrono boost and get more units. Perhaps even train up an immortal or two. Immortals and zealots. However, those ghosts are going to be a problem. We really need to see a couple key feedbacks. A feedback onto a ghost at this stage in the game would be absolutely critical. There are 3 ghosts and each of them have, I believe, plenty of energy. Yeah, plenty of energy. One of those ghosts would in fact die if it got feedback at 187 energy. So if you can get that feedback, that will be critical. And will iNSoLeNCE be able to micro this well enough? Out comes this fight. EMP Shockwave hitting 2, 3 of those ghosts. However, in comes one Psystorm, another High Templar getting hit there. We did get some feedback. However, now one Photon Cannon, more Psystorm coming in, and very nicely done. Ghost, however, with that 22 damage against those light units, High Templars, and taking a lot of damage there. Archon and Zealots now once again re-engaging. Army of 325 versus 1800. One Photon Cannon is not going to be enough, and iNSoLeNCE needed to be much more careful with his High Templars. If the Ghosts engage first, then the Ghost win just because of that EMP Shockwave denies any Psystorm. These High Templars, however, being warped in at just the right moment, able to deal some damage, and another double sniper round to take down another High Templar just before it gets shot down as well. So really, Demuslim with his micro doing a very great job and just staying on top of this game. The Muslim now currently sitting at 35 harvesters, trying to catch up in the economic game. However, the Nexus over here at the natural expansion was taken down. So we now see that iNSoLeNCE is only able to mine off of 18 or 16 mineral patches here. So, and these mineral patches will soon be depleted. He needs to try to take this expansion here or this expansion. But as a Terran player with this very high mobile Marine Marauder Ghost Medevac army, it is going to be hard to take care or to try to defend an additional expansion. There is one observer on that high ground, so he knows that this army is moving out. And as that army moves out, will it be enough? We may see an elevator drop into this location here. iNSoLeNCE does have one pylon, and that is it, as we are currently sitting outside this Xel'Naga watchtower. Zealots, High Templars are very well spaced apart to make sure that one EMP Shockwave won't be enough. Are we going to get a feedback? Oh, feedback onto that Ghost. That Ghost, however, that Ghost, however, did not have the maximum energy, so that Ghost now getting healed back up. But I believe that's the only Ghost that the Muslim has in this fight. However, that Ghost with that canister rifle able to deal 24 damage per attack. So that is a lot of damage. Almost makes the sniper round moot at that point, as the base attack does not cost any additional energy. Stay tuned for part 2 of this replay between Demuslim and iNSoLeNCE here in the Xel'Naga Caverns.